I'm DJ Chef.
I spin the beats.
Well, I make the treats. Okay.
Welcome to the Cole Squared Podcast, episode 4.
I'm Cole.
I'm Cole, and this
you're here.
is the Cole Squared Podcast.
That is our intro. It's been 2 weeks since the last episode, mainly due to issues in time management. I don't know why we didn't do it last week. I just think neither of us felt up to it.
That's true.
And then the week previous, we had a play going on, so we were completely tired and had absolutely no time to do anything, despite me having stayed over at his home.
That is very true. But 2 weeks from our last podcast does not make it not 3 weeks from the famed Arbor Day special.
Yes, Arbor Day's coming up soon, so make sure you grab some tree seeds and just put them in different places in celebration of Earth Day and Arbor Day. And in celebration of Arbor Day, we will be planting one tree and releasing a 2-hour-long Cole Squared episode.
Let's just take a second to appreciate Arbor Day. The day dedicated to trees.
We don't have to appreciate it yet. We have a whole episode for Arbor Day.
I just wanted to say,
No.
buy your tree seeds now.
Oh yeah, buy your tree seeds now from aggregate tree seller Cole Trees.
If you start genetically modifying it now, you'll feed Africa by the time Arbor Day comes.
Exactly. So make sure you get that done.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure we had another follow-up topic, but I forgot what it was.
The opening joke.
Oh, yes. So, every week we try to make an opening joke, but you wouldn't know that because we always edit it out.
Yeah, I always have to, because I'm the one who edits the whole podcast. We always have to take it out. Well, I always have to take it out because we mess it up so much, and we try every episode.
And we have a different opening joke every episode, but we just end up laughing through it. So this week, if you get the opening joke, hats off to you, or to us.
And I'm glad you watched the 3rd episode of season 1 of Cutthroat Kitchen, like we did before before watching the movies to review for the Cole Squared Podcast.
Episode 3, season 1, Taco the Town.
Before watching the movies today, we had watched two episodes of Cutthroat Kitchen.
Yeah.
Did we watch any Kitchen Nightmares before or after the first movie?
Before we watched the first movie, we watched the Cutthroat Kitchens, and then I think, wait, no, the Russian video came in the middle of
yeah.
Chef.
Father Cat is hungry.
We will buy another kit. We'll get to that when we talk about the first movie. But no, so we watched 2 episodes of Cutthroat Kitchen, started building Gundams, watched the first movie, paused in the middle of the first movie because Cole wanted to show me a video. Clearly he was paying attention.
I was. It was really perfect. Throughout the night last night, we were building Gundam, which, if you don't know, are basically small plastic robots that are just action figures. Mm-hmm. And, or dolls.
I don't gender roll my action figures.
That's fine.
Guy Ancelot is definitely a doll.
But yeah, so he had 2 lower grade Gundams that were shit, and I had 1 real grade Gundam that was amazing, and I'm still not done with it, and that's my fault.
I built my 2 Gundams in a shorter time than it took him to build the legs of his first Gundam, so he stopped.
We had to watch the second movie. All right, let's get.
Well, hey, in between, we watched like 9 episodes of Kitchen Nightmares featuring Gordon Ramsay, and then we watched the second movie, and then we watched 3 more episodes of Kitchen Nightmares featuring Gordon Ramsay.
It was a lot of Chef tonight. And speaking of Chef, that is our first movie.
Chef with Jon Favreau.
Starring Jon Favreau, who wrote and directed it, as well as produced it, I believe.
And starred in it.
Well, I already said starred in it.
Starred in it.
All right.
So
he has also directed several other films, like Iron Man and another movie, which I forgot the name of.
Which we will now Google.
No, we won't.
Okay. So this movie was my choice because my big sister showed it to me and I really liked it. So I really like chef stuff. as you can tell by our 2 episodes of Cutthroat Kitchen and our 9 episodes of Kitchen Nightmares, I'm pretty sure we both evenly like cooking stuff. I really liked the movie Chef. When Cole was like, hey, what movies are we going to view? I said, we have to watch Chef. And he said, wait, you mean Chef with Jon Favreau? And I said, yes, that's weird that you don't really know the movie, but you know the lead actor. And then he explained that it was a meme.
If you don't know, and I'm assuming if you're listening to an internet podcast, you do know, Jon Favreau's Chef is a meme that was forced with the sort of Filthy Frank group of YouTubers. It got around a little bit. I believe it was an in-joke with them, but it was like laughs or whatever. And it was just weird.
Hey.
Oh, yeah, sorry. But the thing I respect the most is that, and I'm pretty sure this is why they made it a meme, is because in the movie, Jon Favreau says, I'm a meme, do you know what a meme is? And yeah, so I'm sure that had to do with it.
To get as to why he says that, are we going to give a plot summary?
Yes, time for the short plot summary of Jon Favreau's Chef.
So basically, Jon Favreau is a chef, and he works at a really luxurious restaurant in California, and tonight is the big night where a big critic, the critic who catapulted Jon Favreau's career, his name is Chef Casper, catapulted his career with a good review, and so he was coming that night, and so Jon Favreau was going to make the menu whatever he wanted, and he was going to make it great, because he's an artist more than a chef. And so, well, he's an artist as a chef. But right before the critic comes, the owner comes in and says, hey, basically, Jon Favreau, you can't make whatever you want. You have to make the shit that we've been serving for 25 years because that's what people like. And Jon Favreau says no, and the owner says, I'm going to fire you. Well, the first time the owner just sort of convinces him. And so Jon Favreau cooks the shit. The critic hates it. The critic talks mad shit about Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau is subtweeted about all the time because of this review, which is when he says, I'm a meme. I've become a meme.
Well, his son mentions how he's been talked about on Twitter, which introduces the social media aspect into the film of Chef. Now, then Chef Casper then makes a Twitter account, and thinking he is privately messaging the critic because he thinks that Twitter is something he is using to privately message his son, he says, basically, sit on my face, you're an asshole.
Well, he says, you wouldn't know what good food tastes like if it sat on your face.
Mm-hmm. And the critic responds back in the similarly snarky sort of deal. Then Jon Favreau becomes a meme, and everybody laughs at him. So, basically, through the Twitter argument, Jon Favreau convinces the critic to come back to the restaurant he was working at,
so that Jon Favreau can cook for him the food that he wanted to cook originally.
And as he begins to prepare the meals and buys all the ingredients for it, the owner comes up and says, if you're going to do anything on social media, I want you to tell me first. And then Jon Favreau tries to get the okay on the new menu because he got the critic to come back, and he gets a no, so he ends up quitting.
Yeah, the owner says, you either cook my food or you don't cook here at all. And so Jon Favreau leaves.
And from then on, he no longer has a job, and his ex-wife is trying to help him, as well as this whole time he's been neglecting his son, who all his son wants to do is come to work with him, but Jon Favreau doesn't want him to get in the way. So this is essentially the first hour of the movie.
Mm-hmm. The build up until they go to Miami. So at some point, because Jon Favreau is from Miami, and so is his ex-wife, played by, I forgot what her name is.
I don't know her name. I know it's Inez.
Inez basically says, hey, Jon Favreau, my ex-husband, me and your son, who is also her son, are going to Miami. You should come with us. And he said, okay. And so they go to Miami, and then he eats a really good Cuban sandwich, and then his wife says, you can cook better Cuban sandwiches than that. And then his ex-wife's other ex-husband, Robert Downey Jr., shows up, busts Jon Favreau's balls a lot, and then basically gives Jon Favreau a food truck because he's really rich and had an extra one laying around.
And then the rest of the movie is a father-son bonding story about both of them working on a food truck when Jon Favreau's best friend comes and also works on the food truck after quitting the restaurant that they were previously at.
Yeah. So, and then it turns from Jon Favreau poorly using social media and making an ass of himself on the internet, to his son using social media really, really well, and then every city that their food truck goes to, it's highly successful. Until the end of the movie, when it finally goes back to California, and the food critic sends in like a spy to get one of Jon Favreau's meals. The food critic eats it, walks up to Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau basically says, "What the heck are you doing here?" Food critic says, "Dude, this is what you should have been cooking the whole time. That other stuff wasn't your stuff. This is great. I'm going to fund you. We're going to start a restaurant together." Jon Favreau says, "Okay." And then they start a restaurant, and then the first time you see their restaurant is Jon Favreau and his ex-wife's wedding reception because they get remarried.
And there you go. That's Chef with Jon Favreau.
Yes.
So, I guess I'll say my opinions on the piece. Now, I think Chef with Jon Favreau was a wonderful piece that really exemplifies the problems with late-stage capitalism.
All
now,
right.
as you can see...
Explain.
As you can see, we see the lonely artist, the Politerate, having been taken over by the bourgeois, which is the boss of the restaurant, of course.
His name is Riza, which is symbolism if you know anything about history.
And as you can see, the demands of his job cause him to neglect his son. Mm-hmm. His son being the lower class, poorer people who are unable to get help from the middle class.
Are these really your thoughts?
No, not at all.
What is John Leguizamo?
John Favreau's Chef was an enjoyable movie. I liked it a lot. It had a lot of good father-son bonding moments, and it had a good message about caring for your family and feeding them. Jon Favreau being a director who has had multiple hits in Hollywood, I sort of saw this as the chef being a metaphor for himself, in that he feels he's being slammed unfairly, and he feels that he's getting slammed because big budget producers are sort of forcing him to make things that he can't be artistic with. Mm-hmm. And that's something I really sort of felt in this movie. And I feel like him being with his son is the idea of success through something better and something more homely, which is what this movie was. This movie had an 11 million USD budget, right? And it made about 40 million. So it got what it wanted back, and it was a movie that was directed by Jon Favreau, where he had complete control over everything he was doing. Overall, it was a really good movie. Well, I wouldn't say really good. I had some problems with it. Mainly, Jon Favreau being a white Italian Jewish man, and the entirety of the movie having this welcome but sort of weird celebration of Cuban culture.
Well, here's what I thought about that. I thought originally the first, and then I forgot this one scene, and so the second time I watched it, I thought, I'm pretty sure Jon Favreau wrote this character as a Cuban man, and then he played it himself. Because all of his friends are essentially Cubans. His ex-wife is Cuban. He embraces Cuban culture a lot. He's from, like, deep within Miami, and so I thought maybe he wrote it as a Cuban man. But then I remember the one scene where Jon Favreau asks all of the Hispanic workers, "Hey, will you help me out?" And they ignore him. And then John Leguizamo, who is Hispanic himself, asks them in Spanish, and they all come over. And then he says, "Man, knowing Spanish actually helps." That's the only scene where I can see Jon Favreau being a white person amongst Cuban people is actually written that way.
So that was just sort of a weird element of the film, I thought.
Yeah.
Was just this white guy who goes on to sell Cuban sandwiches, and his Cuban wife saying, "Wow, you can make Cuban sandwiches better than this Cuban restaurant we're at."
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know. I just thought that was weird.
I did appreciate, though, I like your idea of it, because obviously he was probably making a lot, or he was probably, in a way safer and more elitist job at the restaurant than he was in the food truck. But he enjoys the food truck a hell of a lot more than he does that restaurant.
Well, and then other things, like how the critic was slamming him, can totally be applied to how Jon Favreau has been slammed in the past in real life, because the things about the weight gain. Jon Favreau used to be a pretty built dude, and now he's, a chubbier man.
I thought he was Louis C.K.
But ultimately, it's a self-narrative that uses a wonderful metaphor about bonding and being a chef in being a world where creativity is put into a budget and working can take time away from an important family bonding.
One of the things...
And
Oh,
late
sorry.
stage capitalism.
Late stage capitalism, yes. Riza. One of the things, first of all, the critic's name is Ramsey Michel, which is, of course, a play on the words or the names Gordon Ramsay and the Michelin star. But one of the things that I really liked about it is that it's a really pleasant movie to watch because the people in it are genuinely good, except for maybe Robert Downey Jr. is kind of an asshole. But the people in it are good and they have good intentions, whereas, like, I told this to Cole, like, most movies, I feel, it goes good, and then it goes bad, and then it goes really good, and then it goes really bad, and then it goes okay, and then it ends. Whereas in this movie, it goes really, really bad when... Okay, so we didn't mention at one point when the critic comes back to the restaurant and they cook him the cake, or they cook him the old food after Jon Favreau quit. Jon Favreau goes to the restaurant and starts screaming at him in the middle of the restaurant. He gets recording, gets put all over social media.
And that's when he becomes a meme.
That's when he becomes a meme. And that's when it goes really, really bad, and then he slowly builds for the rest of the movie. So I found it was really pleasant how, like, it wasn't like when his best friend came, he didn't, like, steal the food truck and sell it to his cousins for them to break it down and something like that, which I totally thought was going to happen. But no, it was just good people, and it was just a good movie. That's what I liked.
All right, so final thoughts on Chef?
I really, really, really like it. 10 out of 10 would watch again.
Had a pretty good time with Chef. Absolutely no sausage parties in this one.
Oh, why'd you have to bring up Sausage Party?
Because it's going to come up every episode until I forget.
Okay, good.
But one thing about Chef that I very much disliked, I've never had a Cuban sandwich, and I really want a Cuban sandwich.
I actually, because of this, I found a video. Can we plug someone's YouTube channel?
No.
Oh.
All right, now to talk about Hush.
All right, Hush.
Directed by Mike Flanagan and produced by Blumhouse Studios, which is owned by Jason Blum, who is one of the most successful men in Hollywood for making lower-budget horror films and then having them be stupidly successful for absolutely no reason. Films you know from Blumhouse production is Ouija: Origin of Evil.
Also directed by Mike Flanagan.
The Purge, all of the Purge movies, which are like stupidly low budget for how the last two look, because the last two look like high budget movies. Insidious and Sinister.
Here we go.
So all of those movies are Blumhouse production. Oh, and Paranormal Activity, which is one of Hollywood's most profitable films.
See, when you said Jason Blum,
Jason Blum.
I thought you said Stephen Blum, as in the voice actor,
No.
and I was really excited for a second.
No. Jason Blum essentially make, like I said, really low budget films, make stupid profit because people see low budget horror films all the time. So, Hush is a movie about a deaf woman who
A horror thriller.
is a horror thriller about a deaf woman who deals with a home invader who, because she is unable to hear, can make as much noise as he wants to.
Yeah, so she's deaf. She lives in isolation. She's also a writer, which plays into the like her themes. Basically, one day her friend comes, says, "Hey, your book is really good." She gives her a copy of the book. They talk in poor sign language. Then her friend leaves. She goes back inside to finish her second book, which she can't finish because she has 7 different endings that always end the same way, and she doesn't like the way they end. There's also a subplot with this guy named Craig. He's brought up once and never brought up again. While she's writing, the home invader, who's wearing a mask, shoots her friend who was leaving with a crossbow. Her friend runs up to the door pounding on it, but deaf woman can't hear. Deaf woman's name is Maddie. Maddie
Deaf
cannot...
woman's name is Sarah, friend's name is Maddie.
No, because...
No, I checked the plot summary.
So it was the friend's cat?
Yeah. This whole thing was in the friend's house.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so I'm just not going to use names. I'll just say deaf woman and friend. Friend runs up, banging on the door, so yelling, "Help me." Obviously, deaf woman can't hear her. Killer comes up, stabs friend to death, notices deaf woman can't hear because he makes a lot of noise, and then uses that to basically torture her by the fact that he lets her know immediately that he's there and that he exists. When she says, "You can leave, I haven't seen your face," he immediately takes off his mask, and then sort of taunts her the entire night, trying to scare the crap out of her, and trying to get her to come out of her house so he'll kill her because he's a vampire and will not enter her house.
So, one of the things, like one of the only things that is, I don't. This movie wasn't that interesting.
No, it was not. It was stressful more than anything.
Yeah. So one of the things that was sort of visually interesting, which is something that this movie really lacked, was a sort of visual style, was the intruder's mask. And in all promotional material, you mentioned this, in all promotional material, and in the Netflix thing and whatever, they all have masks. Well, not they all. The one intruder has a mask. And the mask is a pretty, like, interesting mask. And it makes him look legitimately mysterious, but then he just rips it off, like, right away.
And he never puts it back on.
Mm-hmm.
I
So,
don't think you ever see it again.
you never see it again. He
Yeah.
takes it off. Same thing happened in The Purge, in where almost all of the Purge promotional material had masks, and they're never really important. Or the main villain's mask goes away really quick. Happened in the first Purge movie. Happens in the second one with the God Gang, and happens in the third one also with the God Gang, I think. Or the third one didn't have masks. I forget. But yeah.
Which I guess they're using that to humanize the characters, but really it's like the mask was cool, but now it's not.
Yeah, like a big problem with Blumhouse films is they're extremely low budget, which is fine, but usually when you're low budget, you have a chance to really go somewhere with a visual style because you're not able to, spend all your money on style. So you have to decide on something. Blumhouse films don't really do that, and they're just sort of this generic horror sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, I thought the premise was interesting. One thing I didn't like is how this was from a third person's view of a deaf woman's perspective on this. But every single sound in this movie was exemplified.
What do you mean?
Like, when she took the frying pan out, you heard every sound that frying pan made.
Yeah.
So that you made sure you knew in this movie you heard everything that was happening and she heard none of it.
Mm-hmm. Or like how every single one of her... I noticed like all of her Apple products always have all of the sounds turned up.
Mm-hmm.
Which I also noticed they used the incorrect FaceTime ringtone. So that's one sausage party right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing Blumhouse Productions did, I believe, was Unfriended, which was a movie entirely about technology.
About friendship.
I had looked up sort of plot summary and details on Hush, and it suggested movies about friendship, in which it gave me the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Unfriended, and Friends with Benefits. So...
At least we bring it back to Justin Timberlake.
That's really what's important. Justin Timberlake was in this movie.
Wait, really?
No.
Oh, damn it.
Got you again.
So yes, problems with Hush. It doesn't really go anywhere until, like, essentially what happens is she gets scared and she cries, and then she walks out of the house, and then he finds her, so she goes back in, and she gets scared, and she cries.
Repeat.
Until this guy comes who is...
John, which is Sarah's boyfriend.
I thought it was the friend's boyfriend.
No.
Anyway, John comes. John's a huge dude. The serial killer is kind of straggly. John comes, immediately figures out that the serial killer is a serial killer, and he goes to hit him in the head with a rock. But then deaf woman starts beating on the glass. John is distracted. Serial killer stabs him in the throat. Serial killer kills the guy. And then we go back to the formula for another 20 minutes.
Yeah, the big problem with Hush is it goes nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the stakes are never raised. It starts at the movie where she's already isolated in a house and she's deaf. And you know there's a home intruder because that's what you saw in the advertisements.
Mm.
And the weird thing about this movie is it's just stressful because the whole time you're expecting a jump scare. There's no jump scares in this movie.
The only thing close to a jump scare is when John looks at Sarah and out of the side of the screen a knife goes into his throat.
Yeah, that's the closest thing to a jump scare. The only other things are sort of loud noises, but you get accustomed to it because everything in this movie is really loud.
Mm-hmm.
So the entire movie is just stress and waiting for that to happen more than paying attention to things. And the stakes never go up, and everything's either really quiet or like the home invaders. The home invader's never in the house. Like that's.
No, he doesn't enter the house until the end when she lets him in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's what is it? I'm trying to remember. There was a serial killer who, what he would do is he would not enter homes unless your door was unlocked, because Richard Chase, that was his name. He would not enter your home until the door was unlocked, because he felt he was unwelcome if the door was locked. So make sure to lock your doors. That's what this really reminded me of. But yeah, Hush.
Well, the only way that the stakes get raised is most of the time when she leaves the house to do something. Like, one was to turn the power back on, which she doesn't do. One was to start her.
She never did that. She was just thinking about that.
Oh, right, because in her dream she got killed. Anyway, well, we never got to the end of the movie. So basically, throughout the entire time, every time she leaves, she gets a little bit more injured. It's like, at one time he shoots her in the leg with a crossbow. Another time he breaks her hand and steps on it because she was in the door. And then at the very end of the movie, it goes back to how she has 7 endings for her book, and they all in the same way, except there's 7 different ways that she could die in the house. So she said, you can't run, you can't hide, you can't wait, because she's bleeding out. The killer's going to get inside, and she can't run because she has a bad leg. She says that she's going to fight. And basically the movie ends with, she sees the killer is about to kill her cat, so she shoots him with a crossbow because she got the crossbow. He runs up, breaks her hand, and then she writes in her own leg blood on the door, "Come inside, you coward." So he's breaking on the door with the tire iron, trying to get in. She goes and hides.
And that was some tough glass.
Yeah, it took him like 30 years, and he gave up trying to break through one glass panel with a tire iron. This guy was really scrawny. So yeah, so that happens. She goes and sits down. She's losing vision, but he comes inside. They fight a lot. She sprays him in the head. He stabs her a lot. Eventually what happens is he almost kills her, but she stabs him in the neck with a wine opener, and he dies. She calls the police, turns on her fire alarm, and then she sits outside while the police show up.
And doesn't she die at the end of the film?
I mean, that's left up to interpretation, but...
Okay, she dies at the end of the film.
Okay, I thought she didn't, but there you go.
My conclusion's correct. My biggest problem with Hush, in its entirety, is that it says absolutely nothing. It's the same thing with most Blumhouse films. They're a story, but they don't really have... I don't want to say artistic merit, because that makes me sound haughty-toddy, but they don't have any lessons. They're not teaching anything.
What do you make? What do you do?
It's sort of vacuous entertainment. It's meaningless.
Whereas, like, Chef sort of had commentary similar to Ratatouille's about the value of critics tearing down someone who is very passionate about what he does with nothing but words. And Chef also had an argument for the value of bonding and family and friends over work and pay.
That's just the sort of thing here is there's a big juxtaposition to where Chef says things and has this underlying meaning to it, apart from the story that's in. And a lot of Blumhouse productions, Paranormal Activity, Insidious, all that, don't really have any underlying thing. And when they do, they're like stupid obvious, like The Purge. Like The Purge is like, this is what would happen if the rich completely overtook the poor.
Yeah.
And it's like you're not saying anything like big with that. That's just sort of where we're at. So to leave, I want to say something that I heard from J.J. Abrams, which was that you don't watch Jaws for the big shark. You watch Jaws because of the disassembling family and the man who's lost his way, who just wants to be happy with his son and his wife again. The reason why you would watch Chef is not for the cooking montages, which are great, but it's for the story about the man who feels he is totally underappreciated and feels undervalued in his work, leaving, doing something that's totally less valuable in the terms of the public eye, and having a great time of fun doing it because he's bonding with his son. Hush is about a woman who's deaf and a man is intruding on her home. So, ending ratings for Hush?
Hush, I would give it 4 Justin Timberlakes out of 10, and the rest are sausage parties.
All right. I would also go with a 4 out of 10, and I'd give it 1 sausage party.
Great.
So that's 1/10 of a sausage party.
Also, throwing this out there right now, Jon Favreau greater than Seth Rogen.
Yes.
There we go.
Entirely. All right, so next up, the recently concluded 2017 Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship Regional Qualifiers.
There we go. All right, so